Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving straight into one of the most exciting intersections in all of tech right now. We're talking about the massive collision between physical, real-world hardware and blockchain technology. It's called DePIN, Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks. And in this explainer, we're zooming in on 5 specific DePIN assets that are currently trading under 10 cents. Analysts are pointing to these as having huge asymmetric potential in 2026. Merging the physical and digital, it's an absolute paradigm shift. It means taking that decentralized magic that completely flipped finance on its head and applying it to the actual infrastructure running our cities, our internet, and our global compute power. So if you want to understand how crypto is literally moving off your screen and into the real world around you, well, you're exactly in the right place. Right off the bat, I want to hit you with this staggering number, $150 million. And look, this isn't some speculative trading volume. This represents the actual monthly on-chain revenue generated by top DePIN networks in early 2026. We are talking about real money paid by real customers for physical services. So what does that actually look like? Well, it looks like everyday people getting paid just to map their local streets with a dash cam, or sharing their unused computer hard drive space to store encrypted enterprise data, or even independent operators running micro antennas to give cellular coverage to their own neighborhoods. I mean, some of these projects have seen an absolutely wild 800% jump in revenue year over year. This single number totally validates that this sector has massive scale and is solving tangible, real-world problems today. Okay, let's dive into this roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the 2026 DePIN boom, unpack what exactly DePIN is, look at AI and the compute squeeze, hit those top 5 sub-10 cent DePINs, and wrap up with the real-world risks. Let's get right to it. Part 1, the 2026 DePIN boom, moving from speculation straight into real revenue. So we're basically witnessing a massive macro shift right now. The convergence of blockchain and physical infrastructure has officially graduated from a fun experimental narrative into a literal cornerstone of the global digital economy. By mid-2026, the total market cap of the DePIN sector hit this massive milestone, an estimated $20 billion. To give you some context on how fast this is moving, earlier in 2026, the sector was sitting around 9 to 10 billion. So yeah, it rapidly doubled, and in doing so, it actually outpaced the entire Oracle sector. And why is that a huge deal? Well, remember that Oracle networks, the ones feeding external data into blockchains, were the absolute backbone of the DeFi summer a few years ago. They were the critical infrastructure that made the whole thing tick. So DePIN overtaking Oracle's, that signals a major coming of age for this space. It shows that the 250-plus active projects out there, spanning compute, storage, wireless, you name it, are no longer just cool concepts. The market is basically saying that DePIN is now a foundational layer of our infrastructure. All right, part 2. What exactly is DePIN? Crowdsourcing the physical world. Before we get into the specific tokens, let's just make absolutely sure we're on the same page about what this actually is. DePIN stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks. Rather than one giant corporation owning all the servers, cables, or data centers, DePIN empowers everyday people. A really good way to think about this is by looking at Airbnb or Uber. Uber doesn't own the cars, Airbnb doesn't own the houses. They're basically just decentralized networks connecting supply with demand, right? Well, DePIN uses that exact same playbook, but instead of sharing your house, you're sharing your internet bandwidth or your computer's processing power, or maybe putting a weather sensor on your roof. You, the operator, buy the hardware, plug it in, and the blockchain protocol automatically verifies your useful work and pays you in tokens. You're essentially crowdsourcing physical resources to build a completely open, resilient, and super efficient network. And this brilliantly illustrates the fundamental difference in how these networks actually scale. Look at the legacy side for a second. You've got these centralized, corporate-owned giants. Think AWS or traditional telecoms. They need billions in upfront capital expenditures, or CapEx. If a telecom wants to expand coverage, they've got to buy huge pots of land, fight for thousands of local permits, build these massive concrete data centers, and install crazy expensive industrial cooling systems. It's incredibly slow and it's incredibly expensive. But on the right, DePIN completely flips the script. It's decentralized and community-owned. Because thousands of individual people are supplying the hardware from their own homes or offices, the network totally bypasses all those traditional Web 2 roadblocks. It distributes the cost across the crowd. The protocol just coordinates the hardware, and end users end up paying for the service at a fraction of the legacy cost. It's honestly just incredibly capital efficient. Moving on to part 3, AI and the compute squeeze. The real catalyst for 2026. Okay, you literally cannot understand the explosive growth of DePIN this year without talking about artificial intelligence. The relentless rise of AI has made computing power a massive, massive bottleneck. AI inference demand, which is basically the processing power needed when an AI actually answers your prompt or analyzes data in real time, has absolutely exploded. Large language models don't just need giant centralized data centers anymore. They increasingly need decentralized GPUs pushed right out to the edge of the network. This puts the processing power physically closer to the end user, which dramatically lowers latency. And centralized data centers, they simply cannot keep up with this. Right now, startups and massive enterprise companies alike are facing huge waitlists at AWS and extreme backorders for NVIDIA chips. And because of this severe compute squeeze, DePIN networks offering distributed GPU compute are seeing unprecedented demand. Take the Akash network, for example. They are holding their GPU utilization near 80%. In the traditional cloud startup world, hitting that kind of utilization is incredibly rare. It signals massive product market fit. This isn't just hype. This is genuine, paying demand from teams absolutely desperate for compute power. So all of this brings us to the most important question for anyone actually studying this sector. Where is the asymmetric upside? If this macro trend is really this strong, how are market participants positioning themselves to capture the growth without just dumping money into the already heavily valued large-cap tokens? Which leads us right into part 4, top 5 sub-10-cent DePINs, high asymmetry vertical specialists. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it breaks down the answer to that exact question. Here's a clear taxonomy of the 5 chosen tokens sourced from recent market data. And notice how each one dominates a totally distinct infrastructure vertical. We're not just looking at 5 identical clones here. Aether is actively tackling that massive GPU compute squeeze we just talked about, aiming squarely at enterprise clients. Peak is building the critical layer 1 plumbing needed to process millions of microtransactions. Jasmcoin is handling personal data security and IoT data lockers. Ioteex is providing the hardware to blockchain verification layer for the Internet of Things. And World Mobile? They're totally redefining physical telecommunications hardware. So let's break these down one by one, starting with Aether. First up, Aether, trading under the ticker ATTH. They are making some massive moves in the enterprise AI space. They've recently started provisioning a staggering $260 million B300 cluster for Axe Compute. To put that in layman's terms, a B300 cluster isn't just a bunch of gaming PCs. This is elite enterprise-grade processing hardware, the kind of heavy-duty machinery usually reserved for Silicon Valley giants, not just retail gamers renting out their graphics cards. Bringing this level of hardware onto a decentralized network bridges a huge technical gap. And this isn't some theoretical partnership either. The first payments have already landed. They're also building what they call a strategic compute reserve to fast-track the expansion of their decentralized GPU cloud. If you're analyzing projects that are directly answering the AI compute squeeze at an enterprise scale, Aether's raw compute power is absolutely something to watch. Next up is Peak. Peak positions itself as a purpose-built Layer 1 settlement chain specifically designed for DePIN, decentralized applications. Now, you might be wondering, why does DePIN even need its own Layer 1? Why not just build on Ethereum? Well, general-purpose chains like Ethereum often struggle hard with the sheer volume of microtransactions and high-frequency data that thousands of physical sensors spit out simultaneously. The gas fees and bottlenecks just make it totally impractical. Peak is architected exactly for this machine-to-machine economy. And what really stands out here is their tangible momentum. In 2026, they boast over 12,000 daily active devices. Plus, the network is holding $180 million in total value locked across machine wallets. This proves they've got real-world adoption and are successfully tying multiple sensor and IoT networks together under one really robust, specialized settlement layer. Moving on to data and the Internet of Things, we have Jasmcoin and Ioteex. Both of these protocols are hyper-focused on moving away from pure narrative and toward verifiable, real-world device activity, but they do it in slightly different ways. Jasmcoin is heavily focused on personal data lockers. They're building infrastructure that brings data control back to the actual users, letting IoT devices store user data securely and letting the user decide if they want to monetize it, instead of just handing it over for free to massive tech monopolies. Then you have Ioteex, which provides the critical verification layer. They recently rolled out their v2.4.0 upgrade, and it is a real game changer. This upgrade strictly demands real device activity to earn rewards, using advanced cryptographic proofs. In the past, bad actors could sometimes spoof data to farm tokens without actually running a real device. Ioteex upgrade forces the network to be highly productive. It guarantees that a device claiming to be a weather sensor or a traffic camera is physically, real, active, and exactly where it says it is. As autonomous AI agents continue to scale, they're going to desperately need highly secure data and localized communication, which is exactly the infrastructure layer these two protocols are providing. Rounding out our top 5 is World Mobile Token, or WMTX. This project is taking on one of the most notoriously centralized legacy sectors in the entire world, telecommunications. World Mobile is completely redefining global connectivity by allowing everyday users to crowdsource cellular networks. Historically, big legacy telecoms completely ignore rural or developing areas just because it isn't profitable for them to build massive cell towers there. Well, WMTX's crowdsourced model completely shatters that dynamic. By basically incentivizing everyday people to deploy small-scale wireless hardware right in their own communities, they're making it totally viable to connect the unconnected. They are actively bridging the global connectivity gap and challenging traditional carriers with a much more adaptable, community-driven, and capital-efficient network. So, the crucial point here is how smart money is actually playing this. According to recent market intelligence reports covering 2026, analysts have noticed some specific allocation strategies. And again, this is just an observation of market data, definitely not financial advice. But these reports show that smart allocators typically hold about 70% of their portfolio in established core crypto assets for stability. But then they reserve a dedicated 20 to 30% slice specifically for high asymmetry DePIN specialists, assets exactly like the sub-10-cent tokens we just covered. This strategy clearly highlights a desire to balance broader market stability with targeted, high-upside exposure to the rapid growth of these physical infrastructure networks. Finally, Part 5, Risks and Real-World Reality, the Hurdles Ahead. Now, as excited as we are about the fundamentals, we definitely need to look at the full picture here. Deploying physical infrastructure is just vastly harder than launching a new piece of software, and we have to impartially acknowledge the genuine hurdles the sector is facing. First off, there are high initial hardware costs. Operators often have to drop thousands of dollars on enterprise graphics cards or specialized mapping hardware before they ever earn a single token. Second, there's the intense competition from Web2 big tech. Corporations like AWS and Google Cloud already own massive market share, and they have literally billions in cash reserves to fight back and build their own solutions. Third, ongoing regulatory uncertainty is still a massive geopolitical hurdle. The big question of whether a token that rewards physical work is a security or a commodity is still a very heated open debate at agencies like the SEC. And finally, of course, there's inherent token price volatility. Hardware operators might see the fiat value of their earned rewards fluctuate pretty wildly from one month to the next. But despite those risks, the trajectory here is undeniable. As analysts covering the space in 2026 have noted, DePIN is moving from speculative networks to invisible infrastructure. And honestly, that is perhaps the most crucial insight you should take away from this explainer today. Think about how you use the internet right now. Most people have absolutely no clue how the HTTP protocol works or how SMTP routes their emails. They just type in a web address and boom, it works. By the late 2020s, DePIN probably won't even be called a standalone crypto niche. It's just going to dissolve into our everyday telecom, cloud computing, and energy systems. The ultimate success of these networks will be measured by how often everyday people use them without ever even realizing they're interacting with a blockchain at all. It just becomes the cheaper, faster, completely invisible backend for the physical world. With monthly revenues climbing, enterprise AI basically demanding decentralized compute power, and physical networks rapidly expanding all across the globe, this transition from digital speculation to physical utility isn't some far-off dream. It is happening right now. So, the question is, will you be early to the new digital backbone? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep exploring this incredible evolution of the physical internet.